I recently caught up with Fracus and Darwin for a little chat because they have done a fantastic remix of my track called Chasing the Sun. And I wanted to find out a little bit about how they went about the remix, how they got the pianos and leads sounding so good, and also as a duo, how they work remotely and all the different things that inspire them. There's some great nuggets of information there. If you'd like to hear their remix of Chasing the Sun, then I've dropped a link for that in the description, and trust me, it's a really, really cool remix. Let's jump in. So I've got Gaz and Nick, aka Fracus and Darwin, with me. It's great to have you both on here. Obviously, you're both seasoned songwriters, but how would you approach a remix where essentially the music is already there or the vocals already there? And when you are doing a remix, is there any do's and don'ts you have when you're kind of working with someone else's music, essentially?
That's a
I don't
tough
think we've
one.
got any hard and fast rules, have we, really? It depends, because there's sort of two types of remix, I think, for me anyway. There's the tracks you really like the original of anyway, of which this is one, where the chord progression and kind of the vibe of the track is already something I really liked or we really liked. So in that respect, with a track like that, it would be a case of we might keep the chord progression or keep it the same in certain parts of the track and try and do something else musical within that chord progression, change the riff pattern, change the lead stack and all of that sort of stuff. And then there's the other kind of tracks.
And adding sort of other elements into it as well. But like you said, it all depends on the track. It all depends on the song. But I always find that it's a lot more difficult to remix things when it's in the genre you're already working in. It's difficult to kind of do something that is like, say, from a different genre, say like drum and bass or house music, because the hardcore sort of sound signature is a bit different. So you can do a little bit more, you can experiment more. But when you've got something that is as good as Chase the Sun, you can only sort of improve what is already good that's there. You know, so it's kind of like, so it's hard to make something that's already good within the genre that you're already in.
I totally get, I appreciate where you're coming from there. I've found the same over the years when you're working with something, even if it's just a kind of little remix of a bootleg of a kind of current track in the charts or whatever. It is always a lot easier to work with that than something that's already kind of had the UK hardcore treatment, so to speak.
Well, what we've ended up doing with this is got two separate chord progressions. So the second breakdown is different. It's a different piano. It's a different musical take on the same progression essentially, but it was a case of like, we wanted it to kind of have a bit of a nod to the original. So I think the bass pattern when it drops with the original riff is actually the same as as your version. Obviously it's got different riffs, different melodic elements and stuff over the top of that, but the actual bass pattern is the same there, whereas in the second breakdown it's different. But yeah, it's hard because like there's the other type of remix is where you hear something, hear a great vocal or whatever, and you almost feel like it's like hit the post and gone off to the side. Like, oh, if only they'd done this here, if only they'd changed that chord there. And those are the other types where, you can sort of get hold of it and really like completely change it and sort of do what you feel they should have done in the first place.
Yeah, totally know what you mean there. And you mentioned a second ago actually about the pianos, so I was going to move on and ask you about those. You make use of the piano in a lot of your music, and they sound great in all of the Fracus and Darwin tracks, or whether it's an individual track from either of you. What do you use for your pianos to get that kind of big, rich Fracus and Darwin piano sound?
You know what? Like, it's not actually overly complicated. I would say that there's a really good piano that I've been using for years that's actually on Nexus, but actually it's more about the processing on top of that makes it sound the way it does. Like I squeeze absolutely everything. Like the compression on the piano is just it's quite heavy, but it's what the EQing and stuff on top of that as well that kind of gives it its space. So you can kind of play around with it. There's two sorts of pianos. I mean, I've got a hardware as well, synth that kind of does the JD800 type pianos, which I use quite a bit. But again, the process is exactly the same. I'll compress it and EQ it on different tracks in different ways, just so they sound different.
There's three different pianos in this track. There's the Korg M1, which is in that first breakdown, and there's also
do you want to
contact piano.
Give him a little I
can give you a little play. I was going to say, so
yeah,
just solo it. So that's the Korg M1. Very short release. on its own sounds quite dry. Load the chain up so you can see what's actually on it. So it's got a stereo widener, ever so slightly. It's got a reverb. It's got a compressor after the reverb in the chain. Like Nick was saying, squeezing something after the effects tends to suck out the sort of tails of the reverb, tails of the delays and stuff. As long as it's done subtly, it doesn't sort of muddy the sound too much, and it makes the gaps between the notes kind of fill out a little bit. It's actually got a little side chain on there, and it's got track spacer, which is where it's being triggered. Something else is triggering a side chain on that. I think it'd probably be the vocal, and then just EQ. But we've got like a little synth layer over it on the first.
That's interesting.
So you probably wouldn't think that it's got a synth when it comes in.
Yeah, I was going to say, from playing the track and from hearing it, I didn't know that. So that's a really good piece of information. Is that something you do in quite a lot of your pianos, on a lot of your tracks?
Definitely adding sort of saw sounds on top of pianos definitely do help. It kind of adds a fizz on top, doesn't it?
Interesting. That's a really great shout.
You don't even notice it. It's only subtle, because sometimes when you especially when you're doing retro style stuff, you don't want it overly loud. You kind of just want it to be like almost a layer on top of the piano that you don't even notice. It's just a fizz. But I only have it when it kicks in rather than actually having it breakdown. So it kind of adds that extra lift when everything kicks in.
And looking how that's routed there, what we've actually got is we've got the M1 there, so that drier kind of piano is actually triggering the sidechain on track space on that synth. So it's kind of taking away some of the sharper, more defined parts of that synth layer, so that the piano's cutting through and the synth parts kind of getting pushed out just to kind of fill in the spaces, basically. And then obviously it's got a lower part underneath as well, just a little kind of square wave, and it's quite a lot of different ones. And then I think you bounced this piano, Nick. The second breakdown was...
Yeah, I've got a feeling that piano is actually from the Native Instruments sampler. I think it's actually a live piano.
There's two parts to that, isn't there? There's a chordal part,
because it's kind of got that melancholy sound, something just laid back on the second breakdown.
Yeah, I really liked the contrast between the two pianos there. Like, it was I thought that was a great shout. It just completely, for me, just made the track, like, it kind of added so much like interest, and it made it I was intrigued to want to hear more after that piano came in. Sometimes stuff can be a bit copy paste kind of thing. So the switch up of the dynamic, what you did there, I thought was absolutely brilliant. Another part of the track I thought was really great as well, and again, it's another thing you guys do really well, was the leads, and I don't mean the writing necessarily, but just that kind of like, just the thickness of them, and the energy in them as well sounded really, really good.
It's a sort of standard approach really for leads. I think we both kind of do stuff the same way, certainly do on the Fracus Darwin stuff when we're working together, but it's generally a case of stacking different sounds to fill in the kind of tonal, and then bussing them together to a stack, which I know is pretty much how most people do things. Having the effects chain all on all of the synths together, rather than having different reverbs and different delays and all that, kind of muddying things up.
That's a good point. Just it all saves on CPU, doesn't it, as well, if you've got like one reverb as opposed to sort of 7 or something,
Yeah, and it just tightens everything up.
We've always liked them quite complicated, haven't we? So we kind of like, I know it sounds really silly, but like, I like a lot of notes going off at the same time.
Yeah, fair enough.
I know it's easy to kind of like go, oh, well, less is more, but I kind of like the busyness of riffs, because it kind of gives that energy, especially when things tick in and you've got all the, and I know we lose a lot of headroom because of things like that, but I kind of would rather have the detail than the loudness as well on tracks. So
yeah, fair enough. No, I think that's a really good point as well, aiming for the substance in the song rather than just trying to cut back so you can get it like ridiculously loud. It's a really good shout.
That's the MIDI for the riff there for the first drop anyway. So yeah, they're just kind of 4-note chords, and then they've got this syncopated lower note underneath as well. I don't know whether that's on all the channels. It does appear to be on all the channels actually.
And could you just play that, please, just for the
so just the stack? Yeah. Another little thing which I'm not sure everybody does, but I know plenty of us do, is to put a side chain on the leads when the kick drops in.
Yeah.
It's ever so subtle, but it's enough to kind of let the kick punch through. So that's why it sounds a little bit sort of. I'll take it off so you can. Actually, I think on the second break, second drop, sorry, the side chain doesn't come in, so that it is slightly looser.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, that's a really good thing to have done as well, just to switch up, I guess.
But I can play the separate parts if you'd like. So there's the layer that was layered over the piano as well.
Yeah.
So there's that one. Then there's this. Very similar, but probably slightly narrower, I would imagine, on the stereo image. And then really detuned one.
Mm-hmm.
And then this little boy at the bottom, which sounds really not good on its own. But
they're the sum of their parts, I guess, aren't they?
Yeah, they're all there for a reason. Like,
Yeah,
they would have
yeah.
just been something we weren't quite happy with, so we've put something else in just to like plug the gap, I guess.
Most of the time, the top end, the top layer would drop out when the vocal comes in, just so
Yeah,
the riff is still there, but it's not as sort of like ear piercing. So
you can
let
see
the vocal sort of drive through.
that bit there. It's called very topsy, that layer.
Yeah.
Creative title. But yeah, that
Yeah.
disappears where the vocal comes in, just like Nick said. So, and then the vocal is used as a trigger for track space on the entire stack. Not massively strong, like 5% or something, although I've probably turned it up on the send just to let that vocal cut through over the top of the vocal. So just to give it a little bit more breath, you know.
I see. That's great. And on the subject of the vocal, how did you kind of go about the processing there? Like, and we both worked with the vocal. The recording was pretty good, so that's obviously one thing that no, neither of us had to tamper with too much when working with it. But like in terms of getting it to sound kind of big in the mix, was there anything that you did? What would your normal, I guess, what would your sort of process be behind the vocal?
But it's got some AI harmonies in there, which it didn't have when it came through.
Yeah.
So it's got these little. And we've kind of used Melodyne to like create harmonies that work within the chord progression. That's just synced it up over the chorus. Yeah, I'll let Nick talk about the vocal processing and stuff.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I mean, you know, not overdoing it. I mean, the main thing with vocals I always find is the recording. If the recording's good, then you don't actually have to do an awful lot. You know, the compression will do the right thing, and you know, a little bit of EQ just to make it cut through based on what we're doing in the track. But ultimately, it's a good recording, so you don't actually have to do an awful lot.
It's just put through this waves compressor, this API, just put 2500, and a little bit of stereo width on the effects channel, and then just EQ, delay, reverb, another slight bit of compression after the effects, but only very, very slight, and another EQ at the bottom, just a little bit of brightness, around 5K, rolled everything off from like 140, 150 down. And yeah, like Nick said, if it's recorded well, it's good. I think there's a notch on one of the EQs as well, just to slightly de-ess it. But
I always find if we're doing too much in a track, like it's like, oh, that's when you have to knock it on the head. I always find that the least you're doing, and if it's sounding good and you're not overdoing stuff, good. It's when you start doing loads and nothing, and you're still fighting with it. That's when you need to knock it on the head.
Yeah. I've been there before. I know what you mean. And vocals as well. You know, if you, especially if you're working with a bit of a rough recording, you know, it's more painful than when you can't get your lead sounding right or the kick and the bass. It is probably the most painful and challenging area to work in, where you know, when a vocal isn't going your way. But yeah, in this case, I love the AI harmony layers, and that's a really good shout. So yeah, it's great to get an insight on the vocal. And with this remix, like, where did you start with it? You know, when you kind of first went to start the remix, what was the starting point for you, like breakdown, chords, etc.?
I'm sure we actually did the riff and the drums and stuff.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we had a little bank of blocks. I think we did a block and built up the lead stack and the riff, then did a block with the breakdown and a block with the flat bass. That's another thing I was going to say, actually, if we are doing little tips and tricks and things, something we always do, making sure that percussion is tuned to the key of the track. So obviously working out the chord progressions you're going to use early on is a good place to start, because if you're then going to tune the hats and the claps and the snares and everything to the root note, you obviously need to know what key you're going to write in. It might be that you then completely change what you're writing later on. So if you do the music first and you've got riffs and you've got chord progressions that you're happy with, you can then work out what your flat bass, your root note's going to be, and then do the percussion that way. Whereas I think if you started with the drums with nothing else, you don't necessarily know whether you're going to change the chord progression of the track or not.
I remember you saying before actually that you tune sort of all of the percussion and stuff like that, which is, yeah, I mean, that's a great tip out there for anybody that's kind of, well, any level really. Obviously having that, you know, synergy between everything and it working together is a great shout.
Depends how many tonal elements like certain things have got. Some things sort of barely have any, but like definitely off snares and definitely open hats and things like that have probably got more tone than you think. And when you we just do it with like battery or contact battery pretty much most of the time,
good, yeah,
and then bounce them to audio. But if you find something that's probably one or two, maybe a push 3 semitones away from where you want it to be, generally you can tune it a little bit of EQ and get it, and it will fighter together with everything.
Yeah, I think like open hats, I always find if you pitch them too much, you don't have much to work with before they either, you know, they sound like too low or too high depending on which one you picked out. That's always been a tricky one for me. Okay, so moving on from the Chasing the Sun remix, you guys obviously work on a lot of music together and you have done for years, and I know from sort of previous conversations you work in the studio a lot, but you also work remotely as well. What advice would you give to any producers out there who are using the internet for collaborations, you know, to kind of keep that vibe and the synergy between each other? And also how would you work in terms of like, you know, workflow, stems, projects going you know, across the internet as well when working remotely?
Like actually going back, I mean, we used to do a lot in the studio together. Like if you go back like say 10-12 years ago, we were probably doing most of the tracks in the studio together. I mean, recent times it has been pretty much all remotely, but I always find that either one of us will start at something and then the project will get sent over and then Gaz will work on it and then send it back to me, or vice versa. And we've always kind of done that. I mean, we don't tend to do the live remote working together thing.
It's more back and forth these days, isn't it?
Yeah, it's always kind of been like that. Would we have a go at it in the future? Possibly. But, you know, when you get into a groove and this is how we've always worked.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely.
I don't switch it really, but yeah, I mean, I've always trusted Gaz, and Gaz has trusted me on stuff. We've got a similar, pretty much the same taste in music from top to bottom. It's nice.
It's like a little Christmas present every time it comes back. Do you know what I mean? When you do something, you just like, one of us will kind of work on something for half a day or whatever, or maybe even a full day on something, and just be like, right, I've kind of reached a point with this, and then you send it off and it comes back and there's stuff been added and you're like, yeah, boy, that's what I wanted. Do you know what I mean? And it just it spurs you on to get on and do the next bit, and vice versa. Great. I think that's the exciting part of it, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously where you are sending projects and whatnot, do you have a very similar library of VSTs, plugins and presets and everything like that? Have you kind of almost like mirrored what you've got in order for things to run smoothly?
Yeah, it's definitely over 50%, isn't it? Like there's stuff that I've got and we both got, but there's certain things that we don't have. So what happens when that happens is that I'll bounce stuff down or Gaz will bounce stuff down. So we've got the audio of it when we're working. So we do it that way. So we tend not to run into problems when it's Gaz not having something or I haven't got something. We kind of make up for it that way.
And generally, if there's something needs changing or you end up using something that's come as audio, but then you change the chord progression with it later on, I just will send the MIDI and say, can you just re-render that arpeggio or whatever, but here's the MIDI for it changed, or vice versa. Nick sometimes sends bits and I'll render something and send it back as like an alternate version. But yeah, just audio stems really.
If you both had the option to only work with one VST or plugin that was paid for and everything else had to be stock plugins, which one would you each choose?
Do we still get to use audio?
Yeah, you could still use audio. It's just if you know, you can only use stock plugins. There's one VST or plugin. You're only allowed one choice. Which would you pick?
I'm going to be a bit of a cop out, and I'm going to say Serum 2.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that's a
Serum or
pretty
Serum 2, but
pretty
only
good
because
choice.
pretty much do everything on there, and I like the idea that you can import your own waveforms and things like that, and I like the fact that you can kind of do drums, you can do bass, you can do everything on it, and yeah, it's my go-to thing, and I know it's a go-to thing for everybody, but yeah, that'll be the one.
I'm just going to be contrary because I probably would have said Serum as well, but yeah, I think Silent is up there as well. I can't think of the last track I made where we didn't use Silent in some capacity. And again, I think once you get under the bonnet of it, you can pretty much make everything. Obviously, it's a little bit more restricted than Serum in terms of the waveforms and stuff like that. You know, there's a lot you can do with Silent.
They're both serious, and I mean, Silent has been around for a long, long time, and it's held its own. It's not really been superseded, has it? I know Serum's come along, but you know, everyone I know that has them, it will be using both. I wouldn't say Silent was kind of lost any ground through Serum necessarily, because they both offer something a little bit different. Serum 2 is just something else. It's a good update.
I haven't really messed around with it that much yet. I see it's got an extra oscillator. I used it for one bass sound in a track last week, but other than that, I've not really messed around with it. But
you can load in audio now as well, which is it's like a sampler as well now, isn't it? Which is great, and a multi-sampler, I think. So it's got some serious stuff. And in kind of, I guess, moving on just from that one, is there a plugin that either of you have bought recently that you feel people should know about? You know, something other than Serum 2.
The only and I've said this, I mean, it's not a recent one, but it's one that I've used over the past sort of few years, but it's the Wave Smack Attack, and I've used it because I like the idea that you can pretty much use it on anything, but it's a transient shaper. I like the idea you can push the peaks or you can lessen the peaks, but it doesn't change the sound, and you can drive it hard. It's just an all-round sort of controlling plugin, and I find that it's done wonders for sort of like controlling everything, controlling the levels and things like that, you know, and driving things. And I felt like
properly changes the tone of, like, it can really make something come to life, can't it? Like particularly snares and stuff. Like it just.
But for what, I can't remember how much it was at the time. I think it was only like $28 or something like that at the time. It's a brilliant buy. So
yeah, that's pretty good going. And what about yourself?
I'd have to say, I was just trying to think recently. It's not recent either. Again, it's probably like a year ago, but we were making kicks with Kick 2 for ages, and some with Serum. But that Augia kick plugin, which again was pretty reasonable, I think it was like 40 quid, 50 quid, something like that. It's just wicked for making kick drums, all types of kick drums, but particularly hard dance kicks. It's just the way that it behaves is the same as Kick 2, but the way that you can tune individual elements of the kick. I don't know if you've used Kick 2, Jack, for kicks. I'm pretty sure you have.
I use Kick 2, but I've not heard of the one. In fact, I've not used the one you mentioned, Nick, and I haven't heard of the one that you've mentioned either. So I'm going to go and check these out shortly. It's good to kind of just hear about plugins that I'm not familiar with. But yeah, that sounds great.
When you tune things on Kick 2, I don't know if you've noticed different elements of it. It has like an effect on the rest of the kick drum as well. This Augia kick thing is basically the same, but if you tune one element of it, the rest of the kick remains completely unaffected. So it's like so much easier to kind of get every element of the kick in tune with what you're trying to do. Yeah, I'm sure it was only like 40 quid. Augia kick.
It's pretty good as well. Yes, that's reasonable. I think making your own kicks now is like become a really important part of what we do. I know, like, you know, it used to be everyone used to reach for the same kind of 3 or 4 kick samples, almost is what it felt like anyway. But I'm hearing now in everybody's got a different kick in their track. You know, everyone's creating their own kick.
Passion as well, because I think if we talk about the genre of hardcore, we've reached the point now where innovation is important, and we need to move forward, or it will get left behind. And you look at other genres like house music and drum and bass, and you know, and trance and things like that. They are all moving forward, and we've kind of got to be the same. And you know, playing around with sounds and developing new kick sounds and bass sounds and, you know, lead sounds, or going back to roots of hardcore, or dipping into other genres is really important for us moving forward. I think the reason why there's a lot of people making stuff now is because of that. There's got to be some innovation, and innovation is happening.
Yeah, I agree. And almost like a technological peak with kind of, it feels like that with music as well. You know, there's no I mean, when Serum came out, that kind of spurred like whole new genres, you know, off the back of some of the sounds you could make in it. And it's the same when some of the big synths came out in the 90s, and when Massive came out, that, you know, that kind of helped with the dubstep craze. And I feel at the moment that we are at almost like a bit of a, you know, a kind of like peak. So yeah, you have to be, it's a lot harder to innovate, but it's also more important to innovate as well. Music now can be forgotten quite quickly. You know, you've got so many releases coming out every week. It's very difficult to get longevity in a track, but you guys have been releasing consistently for a long time, and you've got that as artists, and your music has that as well. So what advice would you give to producers out there to kind of get that longevity in their tracks, and I guess in their music careers as well?
Well, we always say, don't we, like, about not being in fashion. If you're not in fashion, you can't go out of fashion. So that's why we've always done like lots of different styles within the kind of rave genre. So we've always done the break stuff, the more freeform edged, hard dancey stuff. We've done the vocal stuff. But yeah, I think for me, like, just concentrate on the music really, and not trying to get too sidetracked by the trends and having to have certain elements or have a track kind of be similar to other things that are around at the moment. Actually concentrating on the songwriting side of it, be that the music, the melodies, or if it's a vocal track, the lyrics and the song construct and everything itself. Like, you know, a good song should, in theory, outlast whatever genre it's in or whatever style it's in. So like the musical side of it is where we try to put the real time and effort in, I think.
And like, I don't sit on stuff very long either. I'm very much one of these producers that likes to sort of work on something mood based, and once I'm happy with the track, I mean, you're never happy with the track really, but you reach a point where you just go, right, you've got to call it a day, because you're going to end up making yourself go mad. But I like to move on quickly. I like to move on to stuff and get on to the next thing and the next thing, because that's what excites me. I like the next step. And I think consistency is a good thing. I think you need to be like that, especially in modern music. You know what it's like. The moment you have a pause, it's almost like you were never there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
You know,
like a merry-go-round. If you get off, it's gone.
Yeah,
you know what
yeah,
I mean?
it's hard to get back on.
Not cutting corners as well. That's another thing, I think. I know I'm definitely guilty of it in the very distant past. When I first started out, I was very much like, I've got to get so many releases out, and I put things out. Been very vocal about the fact that I hate a lot of my own old music, but like not compromising things, not putting things out if you know they're not right, just for the sake of getting on with it. Do you know what I mean? If it's not good enough or it's not working, sack it off and do something else, write something new.
I guess like one final question would be for any producers that are just kind of starting out, finding their feet in the world of music production. What advice would you offer to those guys that are just out there, that are just starting out?
It might be a simple one. I would say don't be afraid, because I know, looking at social media and looking how things operate right now, it must be quite daunting for someone to jump into music and want to do well in it. And I think the most important thing is just enjoy making the music and just focus on that. Don't worry so much about what's going on outside yet, until you sort of enjoy in the process of music and going out there. It's hard as well, because record labels are, I mean, they get thousands and thousands of releases all the time, and it must be quite hard for them to discover people now. But I think for new producers, I think it's just enjoy the music for the moment. That's the thing. Don't worry about what's going on out in the world. Not you. There'll be a point where it will just, something will happen, and I think you should just sort of focus on that. Just enjoy the music and then wait for that to happen a bit later. You'll know.
Yeah, I reckon the craft is the thing. Like, it's very, like Nick said, I reckon it's very difficult. It must be, I say I feel sorry for people, because we're all in the same boat, but it must be very hard starting out now and seeing how many producers there are out there, how many DJs there are, you know, the level of competition in terms of getting gigs and getting your name about is never been more it's never been more difficult to stand out from the crowd. But the craft is always, I think, what's going to see you through in the end, the quality of the music you make and what you bring to the table. So as tempting as it is to kind of just chase the numbers and chase, you know, the social media likes and all of that, I think if you work hard at the music and you work hard at putting good products out there, whatever that content is, whether it's mixes or music or, you know, whatever it is you're doing within the rave genre, I think if you do your best at that and concentrate on being good at that, eventually the rest will just come, you know. Like to think so anyway.
Yeah, great points there. It's a good shout. It's, I think, for everybody on the internet, it's just flooded with just what everyone else is doing. That didn't used to be the case. Even like, you know, when I started, I didn't really know how many other DJs were out there. It's just like a little bit more unknown, I guess. And although the flip side is now, obviously, there's a lot more information out there, you know, like this YouTube channel. Where people can find the information. So I guess it swings and roundabouts and that. But yeah, you know, both of those are really great points, just kind of like blocking out the noise and focusing on the craft. Without a doubt, will, you know, if you keep kind of cracking on, you will make headway eventually, you know, with it. So yeah, it's a really good point. Well, it's been great to have both of you on and find out a little bit about what's going on in your world of music production. Obviously you guys have now been duo for 15 years, which is incredible, and you've released an awful lot of albums and singles. Is there going to be another album on the horizon?
There is.
Yes.
The music is there. Like, we've got all the music there. At the moment, we're whittling it down, basically.
Great. That's fantastic. And as far as up and coming releases, shows, etc. go, what have you guys got coming up?
Our podcast will probably be the next thing, which when this goes out will probably be like a week from then. So that's Music Cuts. If you Google Music Cuts podcast, it's available on all our channels. You can find it on all our socials.
Drop some links below for these guys, anyone tuning in the description.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll have a sample pack of our own out then as well.
Great. That's really good. Yeah, fantastic.